Perennials do not belong in pots. Let me explain. One of the biggest mistakes I see beginner gardeners make is once they get tired of changing out the annual color in their porch pots or containers, they think, well, I just want to put perennials in there and then I won't have to worry about it anymore. Now, I totally get where you're coming from because it is quite a lot of work to change out the color in your containers, 2 or 3 times a year, but this is not the answer. Putting perennials in those pots is going to cause other issues. For starters, the reason why people typically will use annuals in their porch pots and containers is because annuals give you constant color. They're going to bloom for the entire season that you put them in there. Perennials, for the most part, have a short bloom time. They're only going to bloom for maybe a month or 2, and then they're going to look a little bit rangy or ratty as they put on seed heads, or they just need trimming. So there is still going to be maintenance involved, even with a plant that comes back from year to year. Another major issue is perennials, they die in the wintertime. At least the top part of them dies while the root is supposed to stay alive. So you're going to end up with just dead sticks and stems in your pot over winter, which of course you can trim off, but then you're left with an empty pot, and it's really hard to plant anything else in there because you've got the roots of the perennials still down in the soil. And speaking of the roots, when perennial roots are in a container, they are a lot more subject to wild temperature swings. So in the wintertime, the pot is going to get much colder than it would in the ground. And in the summertime, the soil in the pot gets much hotter than it would in the ground. So your perennials are not going to perform as well. Oftentimes, those winter hardy perennials will not be winter hardy when you put them in a container instead of in the ground. Now, all of those issues are mitigated when you plant perennials in the ground like you're supposed to. You can actually make a larger arrangement where you have different perennials that are blooming for different seasons. So you can have spring, summer, and fall blooming perennials. That way in your landscape bed, something always is looking good. Essentially, if you're putting perennials in your pots, best case scenario, you're only going to have a few months of them looking really nice. And the rest of the year, they're either going to be dormant or they're going to be looking rough as they come out of that bloom time. But luckily, that's not your only option if you have those window boxes or containers or porch pots and you want them to stay looking good for longer. So obviously annuals are going to give you the most show, the most color, and the prettiest plants, but some people also will mix in some shrubs or evergreens into those containers to make it where you're not having to use so many annuals and do so many switch outs seasonally. So talk with your local garden center and see which shrubs are going to look good and perform well in a container for at least a few years. And you might want to do some type of combination where you have some sort of shrub and then have a few annuals around it. I think you can make some really nice combos by doing that. Unfortunately, no type of container gardening is going to be maintenance free. So just keep that in mind. If you are not big on the upkeep of putting annuals or color in your containers or the extra watering and fertilization that they need, it might just be time to get rid of your containers and move more towards an in-ground garden. And if you do love your containers and the look that they bring to your house, don't fall for the trap of trying to put perennials in your containers. Just keep up with those beautiful annuals and make sure that they're fertilized and watered, and you will have the most spectacular porch pots and containers.